Welcome back, everybody, to Strange Planet Podcast. And for this week's episode, I ask everybody one simple question. Would you or would you not buy a self-driving car or vehicle?
Well, as I imagine I might have stated before, I think self-driving cars are the future. It's not whether I would buy a self-driving car, it's when will I buy a self-driving car.
All right, that's fair.
Cars are one of the highest causes of death for people, whether it's from general accidents, drunk driving. A lot of human error goes into causing a lot of injury and death for people. And so to take that possibility out of the hands of humans and putting it into computers that are, sort of highly tested and reliable, I think that's going to definitely be the wave of the future. Now, whether you have, humans able to take control of a vehicle at any time, or whether you have, completely autonomous vehicles, I think that by and large, computers with accurate sensors and the ability to process way more information than humans can, that's going to be a lot more reliable than, some driver who's distracted by their phone or TikTok or distracted by, a variety of other things, or drunk, or, just not a very good driver. And the thing about self-driving cars is not only are they able to do sensors and, take in vision data and positional data, they can also communicate with each other. And so not only will you have visual confirmation that this car is in front of you and it appears to be going this fast based upon vision calculations or whatever, you also have the possibility to coordinate with the car in front of you and the car behind you. And you can tell whether that car is accelerating or decelerating and at what rate. And all of that can be factored into, whether to accelerate your car or decelerate. And it makes things much more efficient, both from a safety perspective and from a traffic flow perspective. Because theoretically, you could, or not even theoretically, but concretely, you could have, if you want traffic to flow at a certain rate, you could set a very high speed and computers could just work out, how fast to accelerate each car that's, on a highway. And, rather than humans guessing or, making reckless driving decisions, so shifting in and out of lanes, you just have a computer that's saying, okay, well, you're on this highway, you're going to go like 90 miles an hour. All the cars are going to do that. We might not even have to do much accelerating or decelerating, except when we enter and exit the highway. And we're just going to keep the cars flowing at that speed. And if you really want to know what's probably coming in the future, imagine at an intersection. Usually you have to wait at a light at an intersection for the other cars to go. Theoretically, you could have an intersection that has no light and all the cars go at once.
That is
and
true.
The computer could time it perfectly such that cars would be just flowing right through and it would be timed, perfectly. Now, of course, there are certain dangers to, autonomously driven vehicles, not necessarily in, their calculations or anything, but things could, like if a sensor is off or broken, there needs to be multiple redundancies built into these systems in order to ensure that, even if something breaks, that another system is going to pick up and take over and, not, let you crash.
Like a secondary default or something. I see what you're saying
Right,
there.
right. It just can't be relying on on one thing, and those things have to be definitely worked out. But I see autonomous vehicles as the future, and also a welcome future that is going to save a lot of lives.
How do you feel about it, Mark? Would you buy a self-driving vehicle?
I mean, yeah, I think I would. I do think that there are some, at this point, probably not. But as it becomes more of a common thing in the future, sure. I do agree with Rook that it is eventually going to be it is going to be the future and the way that things go, which is fine because I'm all for progress. But on the flip side of it all, you got to look at certain things that could go wrong. Like, yes, weather is a condition that could definitely go wrong when it comes to automatic driving cars, because are they going to be able to account for that?
Exactly.
Then you're talking about sensors on the vehicle that can predict ice patches up front as you're going around the turn. So, that's going to be a little more difficult to deal with on that end. Hacking is definitely going to be an issue. It's one of those things you'll be driving along a highway, everybody's doing fine. Then out of nowhere, you'll see a car freaking out and doing something crazy, and it flips, and then chain reaction of stuff, and computers got to account for that, and then adjust for that, and then everyone goes flying in their cars. There's going to be some hiccups, obviously, with new things. It's just know what you're getting into.
Yeah, that's kind of how I feel about it too. Because if I would ask myself the same question, just like you had said, where it stands now, definitely not. But in the future, once it's studied and it's, made correctly and for the better, then it might be an option, because there's, like Rook was saying, it could save lives, and there is a lot of positive perks from it. And also, even if you're going far on vacation, say you're driving from like New York to Florida or New York to, like Texas or something, you wouldn't actually have to drive, you know what I mean? So you can kind of just cruise, and you wouldn't have to worry about, like cruise control and all that kind of shit in a sense, But at the same time, I feel like there is a lot of things to factor in that, like you were saying, that can go wrong. Computer errors, and most importantly, the cost. So like if you can buy a new Nissan for like 30 grand, and then you could buy this self-driving vehicle for 60, like, I mean, that most people are going to go for the cheaper. They're going to go for the 30. And the only thing I'm not 100% sure when it comes to this, I think as it stands now, the self-driving cars still can be driven manually, correct?
I believe so.
Yeah.
I kind of feel like that's a feature that should stay, because I still feel like you should be able to control your vehicle. Because God forbid the computer screws up and you run a red light, you can still hit the brake to stop the car. You know what I mean? So like, you shouldn't be really sitting there in the driver's seat in the self-driving car reading a magazine. You know what I mean? I feel like you should still be coherent in your surroundings and the road, at the same time. Maybe you don't have to have your foot on the gas, so you can kind of lounge a bit, but you should still be awake and aware. You know what I mean? Like, I don't think we should have people taking a nap on a cruise trip, you know what I mean, from one county to another. You know what I mean? I just don't think we're there yet. Maybe one day we will. I don't see it right now, though, the way it stands. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, having, unsupervised autonomous vehicles at this stage is probably not smart. But as technology gets better and better and we get more data, with this phase of generative AI and, not generative AI, but with this stage of AI, with neural networks being able to learn at a much faster and broader rate than they previously were able to, you could have a self-driving car that takes in so much more data than a human can and test it in situations that are virtual, so that you could test it under, millions, billions, trillions of scenarios that would take, decades to do in a physical world, and you could simulate them over and over, and you could learn from those data points and the vehicle will know how to adapt to things. And then you could have multiple layers of redundancy where, you have both the, collective AI that like steers cars on highways. You could have individual car AI that makes individual decisions for moving that vehicle. And you also have, data gathered both from individual driving and from sort of that collective driving. Both of those together will be able to produce a smooth ride. Now, that's going to require adoption because obviously, if people don't adopt these vehicles at, an increasingly exponential rate, you're going to have, it's going to be slow at first, but as more people adopt it, it's going to be you're going to have like actual real world data to go off of and a real need for these coordinated systems that I think will put a lot of people at ease in terms of whether they can, ride in those vehicles unsupervised. And I'll tell you, it's going to save lives because there's going to be no excuse for drunk driving. There's going to be no excuse for texting and driving. You can do whatever you want while you're driving, basically, and the car will be able to get you to your destination safely.
That is true. That's why I'm not like entirely against this. I think like as the technology advances, it will become what we're, assuming it's going to be. But there is one main thing that does worry me, besides obviously the safety, and that is when the cars we have now, maintenance and upkeep can be pricey, let alone insurance and everything else. But now with all these self-driving, computers that are in there and everything else that's going on, is this going to be also something that's going to have to be like regulated and checked frequently? And then what's the cost of that going to be? You know what I mean? So there's a lot of, unknowns.
Well, yeah, I mean, there are
right
definitely
now with
already computer systems in cars. Cars are, have their own computer systems now. And the difference, I guess, is that in a self-driving or autonomous vehicle, that computer system is critical to the functioning and safety of the vehicle. Whereas other systems, your dashboard and, wallets and, your media and everything, while those things are certainly nice to have and your car can function without them. Whereas if you're talking about having a self-driving vehicle that is actually engaging in self-driving, that system needs to work. That needs to be on and working 100% of the time. And so, yeah, you will probably have to have some sort of systems in place to make sure those are functioning correctly. And yeah, I mean, I don't know about maintenance, like maybe the sensors require maintenance. But as far as the software, it's just software updates and downloading data. I don't see that being a huge expense, but the sensors themselves
that could be right.
Are what could be costly, and if there's damage to the sensors,
like God forbid you do get to an accident or someone hits you or something, like say it takes out one of the sensors on one of the sides, that could cost a pretty penny, especially at first.
Right, but of course, that's what insurance is for. Now your insurance rate might go up, but at least your sensors will be repaired.
Right, and then at least you'll still be able to use it. But and the other thing, it's funny, Mark brought it up. I was thinking too was the weather, because like, of course, snow is a major. We're in New York here, and obviously, if you were to go to like Buffalo, snow is not uncommon there. You know what I mean? So like, not only is that a factor, but snow aside, sub-zero temperatures, say the car just don't start because it's too cold. You know what I mean? Like sometimes if you have an older car now, if you press the button or if you turn the key, sometimes it stalls out before it actually starts. But what if that car just doesn't start, period, because it's too cold? You know what I mean? That could be a thing if you think about it.
I don't see how that's any different than a normal car. If you can't start your car, you can't start your car.
Right. But like, if it's completely run off of its self-driving system, it's completely reliant on that. Like sometimes when it's super cold out, you ever notice like your car radio even freezes a little bit, or like, it acts a little funny. And then once the car's warmed up, I mean, it's fine. Usually everything's good. But on that initial start after a snowfall, sometimes everything kind of freezes up, so it takes a little while for it to heat up and stuff. So like, I don't know if that's going to play a factor at this too, in the same sense. And to add more to that, would be, are these going to be gas powered or would they be electric?
Doesn't matter.
Most likely they'd be electric.
I think they would be more electric too. I think that's the way it should go if they do it.
It doesn't matter. I mean, you could make a gas or electric car and make it autonomous. That's just in what sensors you put on the car, what computer systems you have in the car, what powers the car doesn't really matter.
That's true.
Obviously, trending toward electric vehicles is great for our environment, but it doesn't really matter as far as, what we need to do in terms of having autonomous driving.
Right. Because I do see what you're saying, especially with drunk driving and stuff and texting especially too. Like that would probably take that right off the table in a sense. But my only worry is like at the same time, sure, that would be taken off the table. But I feel like at the same time, whoever's supposedly driving, like in the driver's seat, that is, if they're not paying attention and say the thing cuts out or something, that could not be a good thing. So I kind of feel like even though it's self-driving, I feel like whoever's technically in the driver's seat should still be at least aware of what's going on. You know what I mean? Because like that, the worst thing that could happen is the same situation. The guy could be in the driver's seat, self-driving car, texting his girlfriend or something, and then say the car blows past a fucking stop sign or something. He's not paying attention. He's texting like he would be if he was driving anyway. And then bang, you know what I mean? So like these are little kinks. I feel like they need to really, really be sure that this system works, or, you know what I mean? You're not gonna be able to sell something like this flawed. You know what I mean?
Sure. It's definitely going to take, more research into how vehicles operate, not just individually, but collectively, and how they resolve problems. It may take a redesign of, our road systems in order to help facilitate that. It's not just going to be, let's put these vehicles on the road and see what happens. It's going to, long term, it's going to be, how do we develop, well, at least this is the way I think it should go, but it should be, how do these vehicles coordinate with each other in a way that makes it as safe as possible for people to, just disregard, paying attention. And, it's going to be sort of like taking a flight on a plane. Most of the time during your flight, the pilot is not really flying the plane. It's not a computer. True. And so we have to figure out how to, now, of course, driving involves a lot more traffic and pedestrians and whatnot. But I feel like we're either at a point or getting to a point where all of those variables can be accounted for by computers. You mentioned weather earlier. Those variables can also be accounted for by gathering data and studying how a car reacts to different weather conditions. So if there's ice on the road, you can gather data points about how the tires react to the ice and different brakes, pressure, and at different speeds. And then you can simulate on that data to figure out what is, the proper sequence of commands that need to be executed in order to have that vehicle continue on safely, or to pull over to a stop, or whatever it needs to do. Those data points, need to be studied and gathered. And we have the AI now to be able to do that kind of stuff. And I think you'll be seeing that a lot going forward.
Yeah, I think you're right. And also another thing I realized, if this works as well as we hope it will, that is, you would assume traffic violations would be almost eliminated. You can't run a red light if the car is going to drive itself.
Yeah,
You
a
can't run a
lot
stop
of
sign. You know what I mean? So you would assume a lot of those traffic violations should be eliminated.
a lot of police departments are going to be very disappointed. You have to
Yeah.
find some other way to collect money from poor people.
But then what happens? Here's a funny scenario I'll bring up. What happens when you're approaching a stop sign? It's self-driving car. You're approaching a stop sign. For some reason, the car doesn't stop at the stop sign. Thankfully, nobody's coming. You go through it, and then the cop pulls you over. There happens to be a cop there. He can't necessarily write you a ticket for going through that stop sign because you didn't drive the car through it. The car drove itself through it. So how does that work itself out?
Well, yeah, you're going to have some sort of evidence-based approach to that. When you're issued the ticket, you'd probably have to submit the data from your vehicle in your defense and say, well, at this time, that I was going through the stop sign, the data shows that the autonomous vehicle was in full control. There was no input from the human driver. And yeah, I'm sure, a lot of this data is already being recorded, but, you could have a system where you submit, that kind of data to a court and just show that, you weren't driving at the time. It's the car's fault. And,
exactly. It's a malfunction.
And you'll have to maybe send a ticket to the car manufacturer.
Yeah, they would have to pay for it. That's a good point if it came down to it, I guess. Because I don't think I'm going to say technical driver, but it's not really the driver. It's just the person sitting in the seat. But I don't think that person should really have to pay anything, considering that it's the car's responsibility now to stop when it's supposed to and move when it's supposed to. You know what I mean? It's not really up to you as the driver anymore, which really that's some shit right there.
It's going to be definitely a little complicated at first until we sort the laws out, because number one, you're probably going to have to be responsible for and in charge and in control of your vehicle, ready to take control at any time. So they may still want to place the blame on you for running a stop sign because you should have, or, a red light because you should have been paying attention. And then because you didn't pay attention and you didn't gain control of your vehicle, you're, responsible for the accident or running the
violation
stoplight or whatever. So that's going to need to be sorted out because, it's going to be a little complicated at first. Now, if we do have a system where, the driver is always responsible at all times, and then, it's a mistake on the part of the car manufacturer or the service, then you will see a lot of sort of movement in the insurance industry in terms of, how we shift that blame to and shift the payment of fines or violations over to those sort of companies, and what kind of guarantees will those companies provide in terms of ensuring that their systems are functioning correctly and that they won't do things like run stop signs or red lights. That's going to have to be definitely ironed out. We don't have to do it just yet because we're not, there in terms of having all these autonomous vehicles on the road. But we need to start thinking about it now in terms of how we shape our laws to accommodate this new technology.
Right, because you figure the way it is now, even the manual cars have this where they can parallel park themselves, some of them. So you would assume that not only can this car pull that off too, but like say you program this thing just to take you to work. Does the sensors know the difference when there's not just only traffic, but when there's like a crowd of people too? You know what I mean? Like there's some areas that are a lot less populated than others. So like say you're in the city or something, you know what I mean? Some pedestrian just shoots out. Normally, if you're driving a car, you could hit the brake real quick and, everybody will be safe. But if the car doesn't see it or catches it too late, pow, you know what I mean? He's finished. And that's it.
Pedestrian recognition is a critical data point that autonomous vehicle would want to have and know and identify reliably.
Right. And also one other thing I was going to add real quick is I would assume in the same sensors would also be able to find an empty parking spot, say, to park.
Well, I mean, it depends on what sensors you're talking about. If you're talking about vision sensors, I imagine you would use, the same vision sensors to sense parking spaces as you do to spot pedestrians. But, there's going to be probably a number of cameras all over the car that, take video and pictures, which I guess video really is pictures when you boil it down. It's just digital images, and it feeds those images, and it can read those images fairly quickly and determine what they are. You'll also have, ideally signals from other cars, and that they're around as well. And so a thing like a deer or a pedestrian that steps out maybe won't be an accounted for data point, at which point that would signal the car to, take extraordinary measures to either avoid or, stop short. But I mean, a computer is going to be able to react a lot quicker than, any human would to a pedestrian walking in the middle of the road. So
good point too.
I'm not really concerned about, the reaction time, as long as the, computers and sensors allow it to reliably identify a human. It's going to be able to react much quicker and to much better effect than a human would, who might even end up, causing even worse of an accident in order to avoid that pedestrian.
That's a very good point, because like you might swerve off the road and then, kill yourself even, you know what I mean? Trying to juke him.
And that's our show for this week. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, and hit the bell icon for notifications. Strange Planet will have new episodes on YouTube every Friday. Thanks for listening, and we will see you next week.